Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Superman and Lois Season 1 Episode 13. It's called Failsafe. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. And this was very much a lower key episode. It was like, we had such, the last 2 or 3 were so big in terms of the scope and the action and the events. This, by its nature, was everything, and it's a weird place in this season to do it, because it's like this and then 2 more episodes and the season's done, so it's really weird to have this pacing shift.
It's strange, because we've spoken how the last few episodes have all felt like they could have been season finales.
Yes.
And I feel like if this was the last episode, it would be okay. Like, this would almost feel like an epilogue to the season. But the fact that there's like a couple more makes it feel a little bit strange.
I can see what you're saying. I would have felt a bit weird if this was the last one, like after the previous 2. I would have definitely
it's a sort
said
of thing that a lot of cable shows have kind of conditioned into us now, though, where like in a 10-episode season, 9's the big one, and then 10 kind of just kind of is the downbeat one.
I think I'd be disappointed, because I do think this is one of the weakest episodes the show's had.
I agree. It's not terrible.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's still some things to like. There's some specific scenes to like. But there's definitely some stuff in this that felt a bit more, tropey. Like, there's a scene in this where Lana overhears a conversation, and it's such a TV trope to have a character overhear. Because I remember being taught in my screenwriting class in university. I remember, like, the lecturer we had in, who was a TV writer, was talking about writing for things and talking about tropes and talking about stuff that's very unrealistic. And one of the things that we spoke about quite a bit was the overhearing yourself being talked about. And she made a point of saying, out of this entire group of people, how many of you have ever overheard a conversation about yourself? And like almost no one said yes, because it doesn't actually happen that often. So it's particularly notable in this situation, because it's one thing to say, okay, someone in the house hears their spouse talking to, or someone in the house hears their kids talking about them or something, because they're at least in the same location. This was, we set up the fact that her and Kyle spoke to the mayor, and she ended up at the police station later in the episode for separate reasons, and then happened to hear the mayor talking to the police chief from behind a bush. Like,
yeah,
the whole thing was just a bit contrived to have her hear this conversation so that she'd be getting the same page as Kyle, which is that maybe they should leave, that maybe they should move, because no one wants to hire them in this town, no one wants to have them around anymore. Which is kind of, and that's the other big problem, is that there's a lot of this episode's time is devoted to the Kyle and Lana subplot. To the point
does
where
that same thing as last episode, where it has one scene at the start where I'm like, oh, maybe it's not going to be so bad. Kyle's acting reasonable, and then they get home and he just goes off on one again. I'm like, which is literally the exact same complaint as last time. To the point where it's when they got home he goes off on one. I was just like, oh, this again.
Yeah, my problem with it is that, and again, this is true last time, but is. Okay, he's a bit miffed. He's talking to the mayor, and the mayor's like, "Hey, look, I'm on your side." And obviously, it turns out later that he's not. He's lying through his teeth. But he's like, "I'm on your side. Just give us some time, blow over, take a couple of weeks off, and we'll see what we can do." And they have one incident where he runs into some of his fellow firefighters in the diner, and feels miffed that he wasn't invited to lunch. Which
yeah.
I thought was about, because they were all in uniform, so I presume they were at the station, right? And
well, I think 2 of them were. The third one, they make a point, he's still in hospital or wherever it was.
He's going around with the tank, but even he was still wearing his shirt, at least. Like, he was still kind of. So it made it seem to me like he was at least visiting them at the station. So if it did feel genuinely spur of the moment to me, where they're together at the station and they go, "Oh, let's go get you lunch," or let's go and have something to eat. Maybe he just went into the station that day for the first time, because now he can walk around with his tank and he's like coming out to say hi to everyone and make himself feel better. I don't know, but this felt like to me that this is like group of friends at, whatever work, whatever university, who happen just to be together. It's lunchtime, let's go get some lunch. And you happen to run into another friend who wasn't in that day, and it's like, oh, you went to lunch without me, did you?
It would be weird, yeah.
Yeah, like what are you talking about? They're at a diner. They didn't go for some fancy meal at some restaurant that you've been looking for. You would love to try. They're at the local diner where they eat all the time.
Everyone seems to eat all the time because everyone's always in there.
Yes, well, because it's their set. They have this diner, but it struck me as really odd the way he got really bitchy about. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can have them have the awkward moment where he feels weird because they don't want to talk to him and they're dissing him. Because I think the woman there was the one who came by last episode to say, "Don't come in." So you can still have that effect, that moment essentially, although it would still feel a bit repetitive. And I agree that when they got home and he was like, it isn't fair, and he's getting really upset, and Lana's trying to calm him down, I'm like, nothing's changed. Like, nothing has changed since the conversation you had with the mayor this morning. Like, all the details are the same.
This is the first time this show where I felt it'd be repetitive from one episode to the next.
Well, because the arc of this episode clearly is the idea that he wants to move fairly early on, and everything else happens to sort of convince Lana that maybe she's open to it as well. Although it's kind of weird because she's the one who suggests looking at other nearby locations for work.
To work.
Yeah, and he's kind of against that at first, or at the very least he reacts to it like, "Oh, you mean outside of Smallville? Like, we have to give in and look elsewhere." And then he decides that maybe we should just move after this incident. And then she's like, "Wait, what? You can't be serious." And then, of course, she has the incident where she hears the mayor and says, "Oh, this isn't the town I knew anymore. Everyone's a bastard. Maybe we should move."
Yeah.
So, that's that arc, and it's. I think there's another complaint I have about one of the other plots, but this is obviously one of the main factors why I felt this episode as a whole was not as satisfying or as exciting as most of them have been. This was probably one of the most CW feeling plots out of anything the show has done.
Yeah. I have to be honest. I would be a lot harsher on this episode if you hadn't just shown me a clip from The Flash today. And the complaints in this, they feel like quaint in comparison.
No, that's fair. There's a clip. So we stopped watching The Flash, of course, after Crisis. A decision that I am very thankful for at this time. Of what I can only describe as Speed Force lightsabers, where Flash and Thawne are teaming up against Godspeed. Do you know what's funny is that I saw a clip of this on Twitter. I didn't really... It sounded like lightsabers, and I thought, oh my god, what are they doing? Now, to be fair, that clip, someone had actually put in, and the reason why I noticed it was someone had added an actual Star Wars sounds was because by the end of it, I started to recognise Jewel of the Fates play. I was like, oh wait, someone's added this in. So the audio wasn't there in the original, but yes, they made like lightning, like beam sword things out of the Speed Force and started.
Yes, and that wasn't even my only problem in that clip that you sent me.
No, of course not. But yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so this is looking like gold compared to that.
That's it. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, it's been a little bit repetitive in one plot, and it's a bit cheesy, and we're not a fan of this character. But like, small potatoes in comparison.
It is worth mentioning, it's the first time we've really felt like this all season, and I think we came into this show expecting it to just be this. And
yeah,
and
we were expecting to feel this by episode like 2 or 3.
Yeah, so credit where credit is due in that sense. And likewise the kids, they have their plot where they're the boys are both sent to school. They try to like talk their way out of it by saying, there's all this going on, and we're supposed to just pretend to be normal now after everything that's happened. And they both end up going on adventures with girls. Jordan goes with Sarah because she just doesn't want to be there because she knows she's getting ridiculed in school the same way her parents are because she's related to them. So Jordan goes off with her, and they have a sweet moment. He gets very mushy with her. They end up kissing. He makes it clear that she's made him feel at home, effectively, comfortable for the first time in his life with someone. So they kiss. And then the cops show up, and I was really confused as to why they were being arrested until they eventually said to the parents, like scenes later, they were trespassing because this is private property.
It was a long time before they told us that, because I was like, they're not doing anything wrong. I mean, skipping school, sure, but
I was like, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, if they were like having sex in this, well, it's not. I mean, at the time I'm thinking public place, but like, yeah, it's okay. There's a line where you cross where you're being indecent in public, but it was just a bit smooching. It was like smooching. Like,
yeah. And the cops just sort of like, they just know they're there and just come out from behind a bush.
Which makes some sense when you know it's private property, because presumably they've been caught on camera walking in or something.
Someone reported them. Right, but at the time, I'm just like, what is going on? This is so bizarre and seemingly out of nowhere.
Yeah. And I appreciate that the parents didn't really care about this part of it, because even Lana's like, well, that's not private property. And obviously it's changed. Obviously it used to be a place where you could just go.
Yeah.
Which is why she takes Jordan there. But I suppose the only real drama we have to talk about this potential, that these two plots together, is the idea that they might move. Although I don't suspect we're going to lose all of these characters by having them leave.
No, they'll agree to move, and they'll be looking into it, and then Kyle will die, and they'll be like, well, I guess we're going to stay now.
Yes, that is it. Yes, and then they won't be mean to Lana and Sarah anymore, because Kyle
or they'll
died.
do the thing where they do actually move away at the end of the season, and they'll come back like an episode or two in.
I mean,
because it wasn't working out in the new town.
If Jordan gets super speed, it might not matter. He can just speed off to her. But I suspect there's going to be a bit of drama of thinking that he's going to lose her for good. But hey, you know, it is what it is. I mean, honestly though, the moment itself with them in the little bridge in the pond was sweet. The chemistry's definitely there, which is good. John's stuff is arguably more interesting, at least once it gets to a certain point. You know, the girl that he was kind of into before comes up and sort of wants to ditch school with him, and he goes off with her. And it kind of takes a bit of a turn though, when it turns out she just kind of wants to, like, you know, your grandfather like runs this, you know, the DOD. Like, you got any details?
She wants the gossip.
Yeah, pretty much.
So she can be Queen Gossip and tell everyone else.
But he comes off again very likable, because when he realizes this, it makes him feel like he's not an idiot. You know, he immediately kind of gets it. Where I thought this was more interesting though, because he just kind of comes home after this, doesn't go back to school, and he kind of walks in on John Henry working on his suit, and he starts to talk to him about it. And they have kind of a weird like interaction here, where, you know, he mentions, what was it he says that he was good at when he was younger?
I don't remember exactly.
I don't know, but they bond a little bit though, because John Henry says that, you know, he was an athlete as well, and you don't have to be just one thing; you can be more things. I know what I'm thinking of. It's when he joked that he dressed up as his mum for Halloween once, because the girl mentioned that.
Yes. Okay, I'm with you.
That's what I was thinking of. That's what he did when he was younger. But yeah, no. So there's a little bit of like bonding here. I like that Clark just walks into the scene and goes, "Wait a minute, why are you not in school?"
It's like, time for a bollocking.
Yes. So that's pretty much their stuff outside of just the general, you know. I think my favorite thing with the kids this episode is Lois is having a fight with Clark about all the other things in the other plot, and there's a great moment, by far my favorite moment in this whole episode, is this is when Clark's just found Jonathan. Lois comes home, she wants to talk to Clark about what's going on in their plot, and Clark says, "Yeah, we do have to talk. He's been skipping school. Look at him." He's like, "What? Oh, I'm going to have to deal with that later." Right, you go up to your room, right? And there's a moment where she then brings up what she wants to talk to Clark, and she says, "What's this about, you know, 733 whatever still being a thing?" And you just see Jonathan stop at the stairs to listen to what this conversation is, and Lois doesn't even like pause, doesn't look behind her, doesn't even like flinch or even like indicate that she's taking a beat to realize that he's listening. She just immediately says, "Jonathan, go upstairs." That really made me laugh. That's
good, but I think the funnier moment for me was at the end of this conversation. You know, Lois and Clark are in this argument about 7334, and they get the phone call about Jordan, And she storms off. She's like, "Look, I need to still be angry to go and deal with him."
Yeah, I mean, obviously this plot. The thing I don't like about this plot is that I thought it was weird that her boss at this little town newspaper kind of like sussed out she was lying, like almost all of a sudden became this top-notch editor / reporter to realize that Lois Lane was hiding something about this story. It felt a little bit like all of a sudden she was really good at this when it never felt like that before. So that felt a little bit weird to me. But that leads to her going to her dad for like a official statement. He doesn't want to give one because he feels like if you reveal anything else, it'll lead to the idea that, oh wait, this bad guy was Superman's brother, which will raise trust issues with the public, and it's smarter to not do that. It's smarter to keep that under wraps.
There's a logic to it.
Yeah, and she understands that. You know, so often in this show, Sam comes out of a scene looking like he's the one in the wrong, but when he walked out of this and he makes all of his points and she's left there standing, it does kind of feel like she's just like heard enough good points that she can't argue with him, and she's the one left standing like, oh shit, okay.
Sam has consistently been one of the most interesting characters on this show in that he's often wrong and we come out of it going, he's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But then every so often there's like, no, he's in the right here. And, you know, he's not always wrong. And sometimes you have to acknowledge that, okay, oh, he maybe has some flawed reasoning, but his heart's generally speaking in the right place.
Which is what... Joe, it's funny, I've compared at least once or twice this plot with Sam and Superman and the idea of needing weapons to take him down in the case that the day comes. I've compared it a couple of times to Batman and the comics, you know, the relationship between Superman and Superman accepting that Batman should have some kryptonite and should be the one who's prepared to take him on if he is mind controlled, if he is whatever, right? Poison Ivy, for example, which is technically just mind control, just in a different form. But
yeah.
And you know, this has kind of some similar beats where I mean, Batman never agreed to give up the stuff in the first place, but Sam actually does. He's like, oh, I'm going to destroy most of it, we'll keep a little bit for keeping Edge prisoner, but you know, we'll get rid of it all because I trust you and we shouldn't do this. And Superman, after a little bit of thought, and I like this because Supergirl seemed to have a trouble ever coming to this conclusion on her show.
Even when it was like, in theory, one of her best friends.
Yes. Superman says, you know what, no, don't get rid of it all, you should keep it, because A, there could be more of, you know, evil Kryptons, but also the day comes where there should be a way to take me down. Even I need to have some sort of failsafe, hence the title of the episode.
Yeah. The only surprising thing about this decision, to me, was that he didn't immediately say it in the first scene with Sam. It took, you know, a little bit of contemplation for it to come to this.
Yeah, there's a conversation with Edge where Edge claims that, hey, you felt the finally being able to let go and not control your powers, like, and you know how good that felt finally for the first time in your life. And I think it's interesting to explore this, but not in a way where it feels like it's completely shitting all over the idea of how Superman thinks. This is him genuinely saying and admitting that it did feel kind of nice, and that concerns him. That makes him scared that there is this temptation there, and I think it totally fits into the character for him to admit this and admit that there is like a natural god complex that can come with the power that he has.
Yeah.
And you know, and a lot of it, you know, with Edge saying, you know, this is who you really are, you're going to give in eventually, and you could be really in this place, you're a slave to them. And obviously, much like believing in Superman, this idea of believing, no, this isn't about him being controlled. He does have to stay in control, but that control is something that is a sign of strength, it's a sign of respect, it's a sign of all these things, blah, blah, blah. So Lois isn't happy about this. She hates the idea of there being something out there that can kill her husband, which actually makes way more sense to me than when it's Supergirl herself who hates the idea that there's something out there that can kill her. Because the point we brought up when we were reviewing that show and they mentioned that is, I'm like, oh yeah, but there's a lot of things that can kill humans, and we all have to live with that.
Yeah, it was fine the first time when she brought up in Supergirl because she was afraid.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, for the first time ever, potentially. And that made a lot of sense. But then it got less and less believable as it went on. Whereas this here, again, it made sense that Clark was angry when he first learned about this.
Yeah, he felt betrayed. He felt like it was like a challenge of his trust. But I think what works about the idea of a loved one, of the wife, or what would make even more sense to me as a parent, having a problem with this is, I think for a character like Lois, who has this weird safety net for her husband, which is most people will worry about their spouses, their children, that something bad may happen to them someday, right? And you get worried if they don't check in, if they maybe, and so often it'll turn out to be nothing, and that's fine. But you get that little bit of fear because you care about someone. Having this person in your life who, for your entire existence, pretty much, you've been lucky to know that they can't be hurt. You've been lucky to know that basically nothing can do damage to them, that they're safe no matter what. To have that safety net taken away for someone you care about, I get why to Lois that is like horrible, and she doesn't want to consider the possibility that there's something out there that this can happen. So
yeah, it's something that she doesn't have to think about very often.
Yeah. So I think I appreciate, and I think I appreciate the idea of like Clark, because obviously she's angry at first, but when she comes back and he sits down at the table and he sort of scooches over and gets in close and explains and admits that he had kind of a. It almost felt like an alcoholic admitting that he was looking at a bottle of booze. Like, that's what it almost felt like. Like, he didn't take a drink, but he thought about it. And he's sort of saying that, and Lois understands this and accepts this, and so there's things to like in here. But again,
yeah, there is, and I like the idea that at the end of this, she's like, yeah, okay, but I don't really trust my dad with all this stuff, and more importantly, I don't trust it in the hands of the government, because what happens if something happens to Sam or he retires, they still keep all of that, and maybe the next person in charge isn't so trusting.
Yeah, the wrong person gets elected into office, and all of a sudden there's a trickle down of what the stance on Superman is. Right. That makes some sense. And John Henry being asked to be the gatekeeper of all this tech for the day it might be needed it's a little ironic, of course, because of how he appeared on the show and what his goal was to begin with. But what's nice about it is because he did almost use it, and because he saw in Superman, he believed, and his belief was kind of what let him go over the edge and come back. It shows he proved that he wouldn't do it until the time it was absolutely necessary because of his actions. So he makes perfect sense. It's
very funny to me at this point how we spent a lot of the early episodes comparing this to Man of Steel and BVS, and the show has invited those comparisons. At this point here, we have done the BVS arc just better in every single way. Yeah, with John Henry being Batman.
Yeah, when I said I compared this to Batman and it was going to come up again, this is what I was thinking of. It was the scene where Superman goes to him and says, you should keep this. You should have the access to this in case the day ever comes. It's a scene
from the comics where he gives him the keep the ring.
Yeah,
right?
Keep the kryptonite ring. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So it's very much that. And obviously, John Henry's going to go look for his sister and, do whatever from here on out. But yeah, so this was fine. But it's one of these things where this is such a low-key plot versus all of the big stuff from the last few episodes. So it's kind of in a weird place in the season. Obviously, we know how it's ramping up because we have a Morgan Edge subplot that ends with him becoming the Eradicator, which I think we called. I think we basically said that
we did, yeah.
He's just going to become Eradicator. Rather than having someone who looks like Superman be Eradicator, he'll just become one.
That's fine.
I will say I kind of hated most of the flashbacks with him and his Krypton dad.
I didn't hate them, but I was mostly indifferent on them.
I felt like young him wasn't a great actor. It felt kind of repetitive. I didn't feel like a lot of them actually added all that much. The one vaguely interesting one was perhaps when it switched to him as an actor, and the idea was Superman's just appeared in the world publicly, and he goes to speak to him to say, he's out there, and
the idea that he didn't have to have been alone all these years.
Yeah, like that was the only one that was kind of interesting. Because I was really worried that we're going to pull some sort of weird thing here where maybe he was taken over by someone when this conditioning was happening and we just didn't know about it yet, which would have just made our complaints even more valid because the whole thing's been murky at this point. They didn't, but.
And it seems now even more that the beam that we thought was just inflicting pain, and then it turned out was somehow transferring Zod into Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Seemingly, again, was inflicting pain. It was, okay, you got to learn to deal with this, because when you do the thing at the end of this episode and go and drain the sun, it's going to hurt a lot more.
Yeah, well, I assume it's because they actually had the Eradicator thing plugged into it. Because obviously, when he,
I guess, but visually there was no difference.
When he was being conditioned, they say it multiple times in this episode, the Eradicator itself had not arrived on Earth, so they were waiting for that, right? Because at one point he says, "Go and wait for it, even if it takes years." That's basically it. And he also says, "Also, go and build a fortune so that you're well, you have lots of resources by the time all this goes down."
I'm not disputing the logic of that here, but just visually it looks no different.
No, it doesn't. No.
So there's nothing to tell us what's going on.
Nah. So basically, Edge. Once Lara's taken out pretty quickly, might we add, Superman and Steel make quick work of her.
It feels like there's got to be more to come from that, because otherwise, that kind of made no sense for her to just do that.
It felt a little bit dumb. I mean, part of me was thinking that it's a little bit dumb, but it's more to the point where he really does, Edge, that is, really does feel at this point that there's, that's it. He has to just go to the last resort, which is to let the entire Eradicator system, take over. Because it seems that what he did when he went up in the sky was he absorbed it, or...
It absorbed everything in there, I think so.
So at the end of the episode here, he lets it come in. He obviously changes physically, because the kryptonite stops affecting him. His eyes glow a different colour. Might need some cool shades soon to contain that.
That was my thought as well.
And he flies off to Uber himself up with the sun, the power of the sun. He's absorbing it all right up close at the end of the episode. But I mean, them taking down Leslie was all right. They had a nice little fist pump at the end. Just again, just kind of growing this friendship between the two of them. That that they're kind of working together. It starts with them together. Clark flies off, and Steele's like, "Right, I'll meet you there," sort of thing. Right, suit, go, get powering up. It's a nice little beat again that sets up the ending with the, you're right, I trust you enough. Yeah. I mean, I think Superman and Steele's interactions were probably my favourite plot of the episode out of anything. Some stuff with the kids, though, and the parentage was nicely handled, because even though I thought some of the plots were a bit more contrived in this episode, it still had some of those smart moments where it didn't feel like it was just doing the tropey thing necessarily. The parents arguing on behalf of their kids why the cops shouldn't really care about this trespassing thing, because clearly they didn't know. We didn't know. And it's not
like they did any damage or harm to the property in the end.
Yeah, and then but Lois immediately yelling that, "But you did cut school though," and bringing it back round to that. I think because we're watching a TV show and we're so used to characters skipping school, watching high school kids, it feels like a nothing thing to see it. But yeah, to them it is a big deal that their sons...
Parents would react like that.
Yes, they would not be fond of the idea.
Understandably so.
So, even though it sounds like it was mostly going to be a weird counselling day for everyone because of what happened in town, and these three characters specifically all...
probably could have done with that counselling, if anything.
Well, no, I was going to say the opposite. It's not so much that they don't need counselling of some kind, but they can't be honest about what they need counselled for, because they're all too closely... they all know too much, they're all connected to it.
I'll be honest, my assumption was it was just that assembly for the first period, and then lessons.
It might have been. It was hard to tell. Maybe Sarah could just do counselling because she's been harassed, and maybe someone would help her with that. But the two boys do kind of have a point. Them sitting through all this assembly stuff, talking about how to deal with this, is very redundant to them, given that they have a very unique perspective that no one else there does. So that's the sort of thing that I would feel no, this is a chore. There's no point in me sitting through this. Stop it. But
you never skipped school though, did you?
Not really. The only time I kind of skipped school at all was in my final year. I skipped last two periods to go see a movie. It was towards the end of the year though, and it was basically most stuff's done. It's not important. I'm just going to go to the cinema.
Of course. Of course, that would be the only reason you'd skip school.
What else is it to do during the day?
Not be at school. Is the answer to that.
I mean, it's not like streaming services exist yet. Daytime TV sucked. You know,
I definitely did a few times. You were right, like, you know, just like, you know, you leave the house, you walk off, and you know, you walk towards school, and you meet up your mates, and you end up. We ended up, you know, just going to the woods. That there was, you know, woods in the area that no one's going to come and find you in there randomly.
bit of casual dogging during the day.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of ways, I think that's why the two, the guys in this, it felt very real. Like they both went off to kind of just the middle of nowhere. It felt very right. That's what kids do when they skip school. In my experience, is they just go off out of the way where people tend not to see them unless you go on private property, and the police get called, of course.
But yeah. It was, it wasn't a bad episode, but it was. I think it is maybe the weakest of the show in some ways. Coming at this point after the last two, big climactic episodes, Kyle's subplot, and Lara included this time as well, feeling a bit contrived and a bit repetitive from last episode.
And a bit too much screen time on it.
Yeah, flashbacks with the Edge, I thought, were kind of like the only thing you really had to set up was the idea that he had the choice of just merging with the Eradicator before and he didn't, and now he's choosing to because he feels like he has no options left. That's all you need from this. But
it's not terrible. It's not good. It's not a good episode, and I would agree that it's the weakest. It's the most typical CW episode by far. But it's one episode out of, what was this, 13?
Well, so far 15 total.
Yeah. But just out of what we've actually seen so far, it's 1 out of 13. I can live with that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and then of course Lois's boss as well was another critique I had, where when that scene was playing out, like she was asking questions and Lois was having to hide it, and then Lois goes to her dad to speak to him and comes back, and then she immediately goes, "You're lying, Lois Lane." Like, Lois has got Pulitzers, and
it's like, you're supposed to be on the side of the people. The people.
This is important. She's speaking like she's at the Daily Planet, not Lois, like the boss, but you're at a town paper that maybe 100 people might read.
In this day and age, 100.
Yeah, maybe I'd be generous. Maybe its peak it was 100. So I don't know. Yeah, so I mean, they have a website. I assume they also post articles on the website because
that's true.
Yeah,
Get them clicks in.
Modern times and all that. But yeah, so just so a low point of the season for sure. Obviously it has the big ending though. I do like the Steel and Superman relationship evolving, and I'm curious to see what they do in these last 2 episodes and what Eradicator does to begin with to get whatever plan going forward now to rebirth Krypton on Earth.
Yeah, very interesting to see.
Yeah, so curious. I think it's interesting though that we started off with Morgan Edge and it somehow ended up with the Eradicator being the season.
It's been really
endgame.
Interesting that it went from Morgan Edge to he's Kryptonian, which was interesting in itself, and
yes,
we enjoyed far more than the Morgan Edge stuff, to Eradicator, which isn't inherently more interesting than Kryptonian, but it's different.
It's more specific.
It keeps it fresh.
Yeah, it's just nice that they're actually kind of loosely adapting various ideas from Superman comics, because I feel like a lot of Superman's rogue gallery is just never explored for some reason, and
because we do Lex and Brainiac, and that's about it. Maybe Doomsday.
Brainiac wasn't done for a long. Brainiac wasn't until Krypton, really.
Sure.
Proper villainous Brainiac. We're not talking about Brainy here.
No, I'm thinking in terms of the animated stuff as well.
I'm just forgetting.
Yeah, if we're doing live action specifically, then yeah, you're right.
You usually get one episode with Metallo, because it's just a cyborg looking dude.
We definitely had a few episodes of Metallo on Supergirl.
We did, but and then Mixie tends to be compromised because they're not willing to go full Mixie with it. So
they never are.
it's just nice for Eradicator. Like I'd be totally down. Get some Hank Henshaw in here at some point. Like I'd be good with that.
This is why I'm frustrated about them relinking this pretty firmly in with the Supergirl world. I know Crisis means stuff's changed, but I mean, how much can they change Hank Henshaw when that was John's identity for years?
This is a fair point. But I do kind of want to see like Cyborg, Superman, like that, but specifically Cyborg. You know,
Tyler Hoechlin.
Tyler Hoechlin, yeah. I want to see him with the half cyborg face.
That'll be fun.
That would be entertaining. So, but I mean, there's a rogues gallery to pull from. So maybe we'll see what they have cooked up for season 2. But yeah. All right, we got 2 final episodes of the season to come. So we'll see you next week for the next one. I presume, unless there's another little gap. I don't think there's.
Unless they're doing a weird break for like the Olympics or something, which I know CW has done in the past.
They could do, yeah, it's possible. But we'll see. If it's not next week, we'll be back when the next episode's there. But let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe. Ding the bell for notifications if you would like them. All those things do help out YouTube channels a lot, so please do hit them. You can, of course, go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?